Hello and welcome to Language of the Soul podcast. I'm your host, Dominic Domingo.
And I'm your co-host, Virginia Grenier.
We'd like to invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy some inspiring conversation. Here at Language of the Soul, we know that life is story. Individually, we're the products of the stories we tell about ourselves. Culture is the amalgamation of the stories we weave about the human condition. Here's the thing. Individually and collectively, we can write our own story. Thanks for tuning in and joining in the march toward human potential. Hi guys, and welcome back to Language of the Soul podcast, where life is story. Today's episode is part 2 of a two-parter, Story and Tarot, with soul aspirant Rosalyn Lehman. Before we dive back in, I'd like to remind you to please follow us, whether it's here on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spotify, all the platforms. So yeah, please help us grow our platform and spread the word about the immense power of story in culture and for individual transformation. We would much appreciate it. That said, I'd love to dive back into our episode. For those who did not tune in to the first half, basically, Rosalyn, a very dear friend of mine, who actually has a background in anthropology, linguistics specifically, initially came on for that reason. It could be argued that anthropology, cultural anthropology anyway, is pretty much the story of mankind. But blissfully, she happens to have a tarot reading practice at the moment. So we were both very excited about the hero's journey and the sort of narrative element in the tradition of tarot. So she came on and it's been very enlightening, very informative. But I guess the thing I'm most excited about is she did a reading for me. It took a lot of, preparation and alignment and just a lot of work on her part. So I'm so grateful. I got a freebie, but it's kind of benefiting everybody and hopefully you too, the listener. It's very inspiring stuff. So because it's so dense and so nuanced and there's really so much there, she's actually going to send me the written reading, which goes into even more detail apparently. But she was pretty much able to condense everything for the purposes of the podcast. Even so, we split it into 2 episodes. So I think this will stand alone. You don't need to have heard the first half, but feel free to listen to both if you haven't. All right, so here we go. Without further ado, this is Rosalyn Lehman, midway through my tarot reading. Enjoy.
This card that came up next, in the next position, in the 6th position, is the Seven of Pentacles. Mm-hmm. And it means like work, career, for some, right? Mm-hmm. And the Seven of Pentacles signifies patience and reflection on progress. It suggests evaluating your current efforts and deciding whether to continue on the same path or make changes. And it also, just look at financial investments and everything you're investing in. It's actually, it's beginning. Hysterical. The Seven of Pentacles is beginning your investments, not only financially and always, is starting to bear fruit. It's happening, Don't give up, Mm-hmm. It's like experiencing the cycle of change that will affect your income for the better. Mm-hmm. And I also just have to say, as I was going through some of this stuff, I also have information with the I Ching and their correlation with the numbers and the cards in the deck. And so when I was doing it, this thing I have, information fell out of my notebook. And I was like, just look straight at the Seven of Pentacles, connected to the I Ching. Mm-hmm. And it's basically telling you to embrace what's coming next and its connection to mothering energy. And I'll write all this up for you and what it means in the I Ching, the number 44 position. And because it's really informative, and also there's a lot to it, but there came that mothering energy again. And I felt like it's that energy, don't give up, right around the corner. And it may not even look what you even have visioned. Because that when I talked about that, you might have to carry a heavy load. And as you're understanding your karmic contracts and what you need to teach, and I keep saying teach, and I know you've been a teacher, but a teacher at a spiritual level is what I'm talking about on a way, that's coming. Like your silos, they're full. In the near future, like your emotional plane is changing, and it's going to impact all your relations and your creation. And so you have, like, your silos are full. It's coming. Like, you're going to have abundance. And you're also, your emotional, control over your emotions are, looking at, like, responding rather than reacting kind of thing. You're harnessing that in such a way. You've learned so much. So it's going to push you on to this next thing that may not even be on your understanding and horizon right now, in a way that you think it is coming. And it's not like to be omniscient or like, fortune telling or whatever, but it's just based on your reading. It just feels like there's something that hold on,
Tell me a little bit more, if you don't mind. You said something about the abundance that is just around the corner is related to the maternal energy, or embracing the maternal energy. What was that?
Well,
I know it's going to be in the written part, but
so the mothering, if you look at the I Ching, which is another divination tool, it's all about mothering energy, and that to me was connected in the sense of supporting you, like, because it fell out. I wasn't even going to do any of that, but it fell out, and the whole thing with your mom and that whole mothering energy around the whole reading, all the feminine energy.
Is it a good time to tell the listeners what happened earlier today regarding that maternal energy?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
You told me to remember.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just as a weird side note. We agreed not to go back and forth too much. Rosalyn does know me very well, but it doesn't mean she knows everything that's going on in my life at this particular moment, right? And so in preparing for today, we really didn't go back and forth too much. But today, just for logistical reasons, we texted a little bit. And for whatever reason, I said, wow, I think it's a great time to do this. Let's stick to the plan. I think it feels right. And I said, largely because I feel very receptive, and I'm really in touch with my feelings. I feel like a live wire. And I said, and my heart is open, something like that. It's not like I'm intellectually stimulated. I just felt like my heart was open. And it's because I had just literally watched the news flash about the 4 hostages being released. I'm sure everybody's aware by now. But I specifically said, because can you imagine, even though it's not going to be a Hollywood ending, right? Plenty of hostages have already died, and others will. It may not be the 2-state solution we want. There may not even be a ceasefire or a peace accord. But can you imagine being one of those parents, and you're against all odds, your child comes home? And so there was footage of a mother, and she said, and I just couldn't let him go. I couldn't stop hugging him. And I bawled like a baby. So anyway, I told you that. And of course, the maternal energy is all over your reading.
Yes. And in the I Ching, it's mothering the change, like nurturing the change. And the old image or the old character is a pregnant woman giving birth. So, and like you're birthing something. I know you're doing a lot. When you take the reprieves and kind of detach emotionally a little bit and sit in silence and, keep doing all your practices and reflecting on emotional reactions and respondings. And it's this opening is birthing is happening, and it's not necessarily fun in the birthing process, but
Well, I feel like I want to interject. Is there another card, or was that the last card?
there's more cards. That was
Oh,
not.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, that was just the I Ching thing fell out on its own, just like your
That's amazing.
Pentacles reverse fell out, right?
Wow. What does
The
that mean
roses.
when a card just falls out?
Well, my grandma would say, when a card falls to the floor, it's at your door. It's like right here. It's right now. It's the energy that's kind of,
Hmm.
you know.
So the two that fell out were this last one about perhaps the great
The I
reward being right around the corner if I embrace the maternal energy. And then what was the other one that actually fell out?
the King of Pentacles that was upside down, meaning financial instability, not feeling stable in the material world, in the
Right.
material world, and um, or grounding yourself.
So I think I'm turning a corner. And this, you know how like you have residual energy? I met somebody once that read something in my vibration that was way on the horizon, and I didn't know it was coming, but they caught it. And so sometimes we have residual energy from the past as well, if that makes sense. And you may have moved on from it, but you still have a kind of a residual vibration.
Yeah, and you know how you were talking about the company you keep, maybe,
Hmm.
or when I'm talking about moving inward, maybe kind of going away from that kind of situations, or I don't know if that's
Yeah,
making sense.
yeah.
And it's
Like again, I call it choosing what to give your airtime to, picking your battles, but also maintaining your vibration. You've hinted that uh, everything is there's no scarcity. That right, I can always replenish. But I do think
yeah, that
just
the
choosing
earth.
choosing who I surround myself with is a theme for sure. Yeah.
Yes, and as far as the inward and introspection and meditating stuff, it doesn't have to be one or the other, right? Like, and practice, it's a daily practice, and I feel like we're all are things that we have to peel back the layers, to keep peeling back the layers like of an onion, and there's so much to learn about ourselves,
Hmm.
you know but I understand, like, getting out there and you
Oh,
know
yeah. I don't think I would drop the ball on my spiritual practice. I think, and I also don't think we ever arrive. We're never sort of
exactly.
magically enlightened. It's a
Yeah.
lifestyle that I live.
So your next card is in the seventh position, and it's the King of Wands, and he's on your left side now, I think, when you're looking at your cards. And this is a position that focuses on relationships. Traditionally, the King of Wands represents leadership, confidence, a visionary qualities in relationships. It suggests taking charge, inspiring others, and being assertive, putting yourself out there, as you say, right? Like, I feel like this card kind of represents you, because it's a fire. Like, he mastered the fire. The fire is like creativity. The fire of the wand. You know how to hold your fire. I mean, this king is. Most of us would burn ourselves, like,
Hmm.
but you kind of have that mastery of creation,
Hmm.
um, right? Like, and I'll give you so much more on him. But in this position, like your mind right now is preparing to accept your role as a spiritual leadership that lies in your path. Like, your ability to express like deep internal shifts, the master of creativity. Now you're like you're it's kind of transcending into spiritual leadership for others, like a social commitment
Hmm.
in that way. Like, that's why I feel when I think of the burden, that's the kind of burden. I mean, that's a heavy load. It can be, if you're, and it also could be dangerous, if you have, you don't have spiritual practices, or you haven't learned to, reflect on the ego and stuff. That could be a dangerous thing. But from the cards, I'm reading like you're getting there. You're at that point. And like you say, don't ever arrive like I'm totally, it takes lifetimes, but there's a possibility of serious spiritual leadership. And there will be others to kind of come in. You'll have that, but I'm going to read out, like I said, I'm going to email so much more.
Well, I'll expand on that one because I think
Yeah.
it's in the spirit of the podcast very much.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so I'll just expand on that one in the context of my journey. So a lot of the thought leaders that I admire, whether it's Michael Beckwith or Marianne Williamson or even Abraham Hicks, that's just the inspiration that I regularly take in, right? Nobody claims, like you said, to have arrived or to have any special line to divinity or anything. None of them are gurus, put it that way. But yet they will say, when I stepped into my sense of purpose, when I accepted my calling, that is the hero's journey, right? When I accepted my calling, when I found my voice and decided to and that's what our podcast is all about, that moment when you not only find your voice within a given craft, but you connect it with a sense of purpose, right? And then contribute back to the collective. That is nothing less than a ministry. And so a lot of our guests that we've had on have had that brush with death, that life-changing experience that really upped the stakes and maybe lit a fire in their spiritual journey. And my point is, even the ones I admire the most, like Michael Beckwith, even Abraham Hicks, they will say, but once you're on that journey, you're going to lose people that aren't vibrating at that, right? It sounds so good, bad, right, wrong, sort of value judgments, but I think we know what we're talking about. When you're on a path and your vibration is high, you leave some people behind that aren't vibrating at the same rate. And so other people will say, when you're on a path and you're inspired and you're pursuing that path, don't tell anyone about it because you'll jinx it. I can't disagree. These things are alive and well. People want to hold you in old roles, if that makes sense, because it serves them. Old familial roles, right? And so I relate to that a little bit, but I'm also not delusional. In other words, I have no delusions of grandeur about my personal sense of purpose. I just feel very lucky that I get to engage in this way, and it's fulfilling to me. But I am surrounded myself with like-minded people that are also pursuing, right, their sense of purpose. Does that make sense in this context?
Yeah.
How I relate to that card is like, there's nothing special going on here, but I do know I renew my sense of purpose, right? And then my agency in the world by contributing. And this podcast is an extension of my book, which was a labor of love, which did result from a lot of introspection. And I'm the kind of guy that has, believe it or not, enough humility that I didn't start teaching until eight years into my 11 years at Disney. I didn't think I had anything to offer, but I do it for the sense of purpose, right? And to bring people together and just share ideas. And so anyway, I relate to that in that I'm allowing myself to do that. I've just stepped into it. And I wrote my book because I thought, man, if I don't have any wisdom to offer, or let's not even use that word, but if I don't have dots that I've connected over the years that I feel are going to be valuable to other people, and if I don't feel called to share them at the age of 53, when does that happen? So it took me a long time to feel I had anything to offer, and I feel very fulfilled writing a book that feels like my offering, my unique soul, my unique mind, my unique brain connects dots that others don't. And so I'm sharing what I've learned about how to dissolve some of the imaginary divisiveness by being judicious, right? Synthesizing seemingly opposing thought forms that actually aren't. This is nothing less, do you know what I mean, than my calling. And I would add to that, I think every one of us is being called upon by evolution, no less, by epigenetics to tell our story, to contribute our unique gifts, whatever they are, back into the collective. Again, it takes a village, as we've said many times. I relate to this card more than the rest because I'm allowing myself to do that without being shamed for it, if that makes sense. So I like the idea that I can wield that scepter without it being a weapon, And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Can you, because the king is the master of it, right? Because I'm sure in times when you were younger, the knight also holds the wand, the page does too, but the page probably burns himself a few times,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a card of liberating your full spirit and transcending the ego. I mean, we don't totally transcend it, but
But I feel like we all need to own our gifts and not be shamed for owning our gifts and stepping into them and stepping into a ministry or a calling or a sense of purpose. I don't
so
think anybody should be shamed for that. But yeah, I think you want to do it without ego or, being fixed on the outcome,
yeah, so I'm not understanding the shame
Oh,
part.
well, when people say, yeah, I mentioned like even in relationships, sometimes when one partner grows, the other says, "Ooh, we grew apart." And instead of, do you know what I mean? The commitment being, I'm going to get
Okay.
to know the new person, they want to hold you in an old role or an old capacity that actually serves them. Families do it all the time. Codependent
Oh,
families, alcoholic families hold you, you know about that, hold you in an old role because it suits them. When you suddenly have opinions or, right, assert yourself or your gifts, it's uncomfortable for those around you sometimes. So I don't focus on that. I don't like hearing Michael Beckwith say, "Oh, the haters came out of the woodwork once I started my church." I don't like that because it seems egoic, but you know what? It is a phenomenon that happens.
when you have like an ego death
Mm,
and you transcend, then it turns into compassion,
mm,
detachment, and seeing the oneness. So even if somebody, which feels horrible to be shamed for your beliefs, believe me, like, yeah, we like in family dynamics and
mm.
stuff, it liberates you from that feeling of people like, I don't like to be shamed. Nobody wants to be shamed, but you don't even, it brings you to a state of compassion where
Mhm.
you would see them compassionately and the roles that they're playing, the journey that they're on, the karma that they're doing. And when you get to that point, you can kind of stop the karmic relationship in a way
Right.
and be done with it. And
Yeah.
then you're the light the hermit's holding.
Beautiful. Yeah, I like the word emanate too. We've talked about you can inspire other people, right? You can aspire towards something, but I like this idea that if you embody your principles, you can actually just emanate that, right? You can walk
Yeah.
into a room and emanate it. So that's the goal for me. But I don't know, I guess.
Yes, that's part of the King of Wands energy too. When you walk in, the King of Wands walks into a room, the energy he's emanating
Mhm.
is one of I mastered fire, right? I
Mm,
mastered creativity and passion. I know how to use it, and not in a domineering way.
mhm,
Just that's what the energy surrounds.
mhm. Yeah, and I think creatives and artists or even intuitives like you with a thin skin, we sometimes don't bring our own presence into a room because our right our skin is so thin. Am I speaking English? Sometimes it's hard to separate your stuff from other people's stuff, right?
Oh my gosh,
But I
big
think,
time.
yeah, well, once you get stronger and you find self love and then you find the agency in that, I think it's possible to come into a room and shift the energy and just bring your own presence and emanate it. Does that make sense?
That
I used to
absolutely
just
makes
absorb
sense.
everybody's energy, right? And if it meant being invisible or sulking, that's what I would do. Now I'll just come in and make people laugh and shift the energy. It's new to me.
Yeah, me too. I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, probably within the last, it's always a growth, little steps, but and definitely in the last few years, like, um, yeah, he's shifting the energy and also just having the ability to lovingly detach.
Mm. Well, yeah, I really got that when you said that, by the way. And we have talked about that a lot, taking the meta view, seeing the shared humanity, and therefore forgiving. That's what shifting the narrative is. So I'll say, like, with the family roles or feeling like, ooh, I regress when I'm back in the family unit and they want to hold me in an old role. I mean, I always have to come to the place of like, and without any judgment, without saying good, bad, right, or wrong, we're just in different places vibrationally. I'm trying to take any, you know what I mean? Value judgments out of the words I'm choosing, but it just is what it is. So I allow myself to diagnose whether it's a cultural, like a societal ill, and say, mankind is at his best when he operates this way. But you, instead of putting your attention on the problem or the grievance, you put your attention on the solution. Therein lies, do you know what I mean? The productivity. So I think it's good to diagnose. We call it judgment, but it's not a bad thing. It's how we survive. And you could
Yeah, and
call it a
it's
function of the ego, but even if it's not just fight or flight and it's not fear based and it's not that kind of judgment, it is discernment.
that's
So
what I was
I'm the
going to
one,
say,
yeah,
discernment.
thank you. And I'm the one guy who's like, no, I'm going to continue to diagnose. You can call it judgmental if you want and virtue signal, but how do we make changes if we don't diagnose? The trick is you don't get hung up on the grievance, you focus on the solution.
On the solution. And when I talk about ego, death and stuff, you need your ego. Ego's not a negative thing. It's just when you master it, if I don't know how many lifetimes that would take, you have control of the reins,
Yes.
right? Like, and so then you're liberated in the material world in a way.
Mhm. But I
And
love what you were saying about finding your compassion, because I think it is tricky to sort of diagnose and go, here's what I need to do for my spiritual growth. I can't control others, right? But I know here's what I need to do. But I just love, every moment, as we've said a million times on this podcast, you can choose love over fear. Sometimes it takes a deeper breath than other times, right? But that's how you find your compassion for others instead of judging, blaming, labeling behavior. It is that miracle, as Marianne Williamson would put it, that miracle that is a shift from fear to love. I'm just talking in ideals right now. I have good days and bad days, and we all do.
of course, it's a daily practice, and it's all of that, and then it's also, what is this lesson in front of me, right? When you're encountering some things, and then where's that in myself,
Yeah, like what am I being called upon to grow at this moment, right? What quality do I need to grow in myself to turn this moment into a crucible, or survive
Yeah,
it?
yeah, and transmute it,
I love that
like
word. Yep.
the alchemist.
There you go. Wow, you brought that full circle. I like that.
and I'll try to wrap this up because I only have two more, and I know you're editing, and it takes a long time to edit and stuff. So
I am going to tighten it up just so it'll be shorter, but thank you thank you.
So the next card you got is in the 8th position, and it's the 3 of Pentacles. And when you got it inverted or reversed, and when the 3 of Pentacles is upright, it's everybody working together in harmony and creating something, building something together. And yours was inverted. And so perhaps, you're feeling like a lack of cooperation. Maybe you feel like you're trying to do it all by yourself. Anxiety, traditionally anxiety about health and wealth. Maybe not feeling appreciated. I know that's just really
all of
general,
no,
but
all of those I relate to 100% right now. Yep.
yeah, because in undervalued. So, and the next card, I'll just
I
move
relate
through
to all of that. It's amazing.
Okay.
These things are all on my radar.
Okay, so this is the last card, and traditionally it's called the Magician, but let's do the Alchemist because it actually aligns. It actually aligns better, I think, because the Magician can take all the elements and knows that, the Alchemist can take all the elements and knows that inside they have everything they need, and then they can master the elements that surround them. And if traditionally on the card, the Magician has like one hand pointing to the sky with like a staff of some sort, or a crystal or a wand, and then one pointing to the floor on the card. And that's more about as above, so below, right?
Which is the
As,
Kabbalion thing as well, right?
yeah, exactly. Or, what's reflected out, is happening inward. Um, so, it's like the alchemist is like a spiritual leader. So it's kind of knowing that everything's possible through the power of the divine. So that's like your formula kind of for success, right? Application of divine will and the faith in it.
Beautiful.
Self-love and self-awareness and confidence, and that's kind of your formula.
Beautiful.
And so that's.
Do you like the word intrinsic? Like we can have an intrinsic sense of self, or as opposed to like self-esteem, which is kind of overrated because it seems egoic, right? A lot of people use external attributes for their self-esteem or their confidence. I hate both of those words, but I like this idea of intrinsic value.
Yeah, and then self-esteem is important.
But true self-love is intrinsic. It doesn't have to do with the external stuff. All I was trying to get at is, I think I've always identified as somebody, not with like a direct line to divinity, but therein lies my value, is that I am, do you know what I mean? An essence. My essence is divine, and that's where my value lies. It's never laying in the space in my teeth or my freckles or the fact that I'm short or any of that,
you're not identifying with the material world for your value, basically.
But part of the hero's journey is that you get blinded by the world and you actually betray yourself. That's the definition of sin, right? And then you move away from that. And so when I said, The Alchemist was largely about losing that beginner's luck, my entire book, The Seeker, is about kind of losing that self-love, that intrinsic self-love, and then being blinded to your own divinity and then slowly discovering it over time, right? And then, that's kind of my wish, is that I could reclaim that agency or that alchemy of youth. I relate to that.
Yeah. And also, again, coming back to the ego, because the ego tends to attach identity to and self-worth to things, material things, intellect, whatever, things like that. Whereas, self-love, self-awareness is, realizing you're divine.
And it's transcendent, right? So your circumstances and conditions, in theory, shouldn't erode that self-love. I do identify that way. I mean, maybe we all do in youth, right? We identify with our essence, but then the world teaches us, right, that it has no currency. And so anyway, in the hero's journey, it is about sort of being blinded by the matrix, right?
And yes, exactly.
I love it. I relate to that card a lot. I don't know why the word magician didn't sit right with me. But I like alchemist. Are we allowed to change the name?
Yeah, I think we should. I think you should actually, with your art, you're such an amazing painter and writer. You should make your own deck.
I would love to. Cards. I would love to. My friend Greg Spalenka, were you there for his episode, Virginia? Greg Spalenka?
Yes,
yeah. He's doing a card. I think wasn't it a tarot card, a tarot deck?
Yeah, he's doing a tarot deck, and I think he's. Yeah, I thought
it's really beautiful. I've seen a few of them. They're really beautiful. I would love to. Why don't you win the lottery, and then you'll be the brains, I'll be the brawn, something like that. And we'll all be rich. That's the abundance. And you're going to be the mother figure that I'm supposed to. What am I supposed to do? Latch onto?
No, she's going to come and cut through your BS. That's like
with her sword.
Her sword. So, yeah. I think you won't need to win the lottery. I do feel like you're going to be recognized and appreciated for your works.
So. Finally,
and I'm not saying it.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Roslyn, I feel just for our listeners, we're going to wrap it up. But I mean, I don't know what you know and what you don't, but truly, so many of these things, and they are universal, but they're very much on my radar. So, real quick, like Virginia, I told you the story the other day about being at Roger's
Mhm.
party, right? The director of
Mhm.
Lion King.
Yeah.
Okay, but I may not have told you this part. Okay, so I was a 20-year-old kid literally straight out of school. I happened to land on Lion King 18 months early. It was 3 years all said and done. But because nobody was on the project yet, and it was really the first original treatment ever done by Disney, not from an existing public domain folktale. It was an original treatment. But nobody knew it was going to do well. So it was a tiny little warehouse building. And I was a literally 20-year-old kid. And I was just kind of doing paintings because Aladdin was in production and it was me and a couple other people. And the director happened to like them. Well, they had a big influence on the film. Rafiki's Tree, Pride Rock, a lot of the little studies I did as a kid made it into the film. I was making dirt. Do you know what I mean? I was union, but I didn't look out for myself. And I was, once I was journeyman, I got to negotiate. And actually, we all got lawyers after Lion King did so well. We all had to get lawyers to negotiate the proper salary. But I was a kid. I didn't poke around and find out what other people were making. But I think all these years later, Roger realizes my contributions to the film and that I was a kid making dirt, And at his party, his 75th party the other day, just before I left, he said, I'm going to put some thought because he knows I had a medical emergency and I'm basically broke. And he said, when I get back from Portugal, I'm going to put some thought into your financial situation. So I'm fantasizing, but just a week later, somebody posted, and again, there's a Facebook group called We Worked at Disney Animation in the 80s and 90s or whatever about the renaissance of animation. And the other director of Lion King, this is the part I may not have told you, Virginia. Roger Allers was my buddy, and then the other one is Rob Minkoff. So
Mhm.
publicly, he says, "What about royalties? What did he say? What about royalties for the artists in? Yeah, what about royalties on the back end for artists?" And I wrote publicly, yes, please, and retroactive, please. So I like secretly think, do you know what I mean? That something is going on there. But now, when you mention the feminine energy, you may or may not know we've had that lawsuit going on for 30 years in my family over the legacy, my grandfather's entire legacy. And I won't go into it too much, but we have a new legal team on it. It's gained more momentum than ever. We've had some victories in court, and every one of my cousins is female.
Wow.
But the two oldest cousins are the matriarchs, and they're kind of really at the forefront of spearheading the current effort with the current legal team. So yeah, there's a lot of feminine energy, and my mom did just pass, and to spell it out, her chunk of the family trust, do you know what I mean? Said
Mhm.
it doesn't even go to spouses. They made sure it went to their kids and not the spouses. And good thing because a lot of them have divorced many times. But anyway, so my mom's money is kind of tied up, but there's a lot of questions about whether my grandfather's legacy is going to extend to his grandchildren or not. It's all up in the air. So this is all fascinating stuff. You know what I mean? There could
Oh,
be a windfall or not. We're spending a lot of money on these lawyers, so there may be nothing left. But anyway, one secretly hopes and one crosses his fingers.
Well,
yeah, and hopefully one of your cousins is like the Queen of Swords and just cuts from the
Well, they
BS.
are. They're doing it. Thank God for them, and they're badasses. Yeah.
I was gonna say a lot of things Rosalind brought up too. I mean, I know you and I over the last few weeks have had very similar conversations on many of the points that were brought up too.
I do. Well, I think of Roslyn because I've known her forever. I assume she knows a lot about me, but I actually think you might know more about the recent stuff, Virginia. You're right.
Yeah.
Throughout, I was thinking, I wonder what Virginia thinks of that.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously there's stuff that I felt related to, conversations you and I have had about this podcast in particular, but definite stuff like just because we've had parallels going on in
Hmm.
our lives with family and situations and stuff, and as I was just like, oh my gosh, these are like conversations we've had, conversations we've had about guessed, or like, the future of what we see, independently together. I mean, I really felt it encapsulated a lot of probably at least the last 4 weeks.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah. And
But
I did not realize that about the trust, or, I knew your dad was still alive and stuff. So I just figured that's, he's got everything and doing everything.
well, I don't want to say too much, but the truth
Yeah.
is, it was supposed to go just to the children. But because my grandmother died only 7 years ago, 7 years before her mom died,
Wow.
that's scary to me. It's kind of haunting. But yeah, I feels like yesterday we were at her services, and then my mom didn't wait long. Now she's back with mother and daddy, as she called them, and Uncle Bob. But anyway, because my grandmother died so recently, it did go just to my mom. But I think they jointly decided that obviously her home health care and her home hospice, which was very expensive, it just was
Yeah.
logical to use it for that. And I don't know if that was legal or not, but they got squandered largely on that. So I don't think really we're going to get any of that. But if we win our lawsuit against the government, do you know what I mean? It could be quite significant. So I'm so not money minded. It feels horrible to talk about, but it certainly
No,
would
no,
solve a
I
lot
know
of my
that's
problems.
it's a conundrum. I'm in the same, boat. Like I worked in education and everything, and I have stuff, retirement and stuff, but I'm pretty much broke. you know, I have all that, like, you know, tucked away, but
Well, that's what I
um
wanted to say. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
oh no, that's it. That's all I was going to say. I know we're still recording. I mean, now I'm just kind of chatting with you guys, but go ahead.
Well, yeah, we're recording, but I do think that money can be thought of as currency. I mean, it is by definition, right? But there is that school of thought that you think of it as spiritual energy. And I do think I've always said you got to spend money to make money, or you just have to invest to receive, and love. You could say the same of love, right? The benefit of loving is actively loving. It's a verb after all, right? Rather than seeking to receive love all the time. So,
Yeah, and not transactional, really.
yep.
If it's not, yeah, and money is just a tool, and um, yeah, and we need it in the material world because that's what we use right now, and we're not living, off the grid or in the jungle or something in a
Well,
different
I had to
system.
really repair my views on money at one point. So here's how I'll put it. Like I've had it and I've not had it. I prefer having it. It makes the bad stuff go away. I didn't really develop any bad habits. I only bought my first stereo at 26, but I don't, if I did anything out of the hubris of youth, it was that I just didn't recognize, do you know what I mean? How easily money made the problems go away. I didn't do anything crazy. I didn't start to identify with abundance, really. But what I now think is, and so then I developed when I suddenly didn't have it, right? I started looking around going, ugh, the people that I know that are rolling in it right now are stepping on other people, actually. And they're consulting, they're taking up others people money as sorry, I'm so tired, taking other people's money as consultants, but they're really not doing their thing or contributing their voice. So I did develop a lot of judgments around money. I eventually said, you need to fix that. And I started focusing on luminaries who their abundance is a direct extension of them honoring their muse, right? Or honoring their purpose or their ministry or their calling.
Yeah, Dharma.
Yeah, they do exist in the world. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's kind of where I put my focus on. And I do believe that we're all entitled to abundance in a way, but more so that those of us, and Marianne Williamson says, a lot of people say, should I live a happy life or should I serve? Like, should I ask God how I can serve him or should I live a happy life? And she's like, actually, and one person even said, what if God wants me to be an accountant? She was trying to pursue her singing songwriting. What if God wants me to be an accountant? And Marianne said, why would he do that? You're horrible at math. He gave you your gift to begin with, right? Your musicality. And so I like to think of it that way. Like we are in the big picture, if we're all wired to be our best selves for epigenetics and we're wired to contribute to our evolution as a species, our unique gifts are our contribution to the world. We just need to get in touch with them. Does that make sense? But so I do think maybe divine compensation is the term. We will not necessarily find abundance, but we'll be comfortable.
Yeah, and I'm talking just financial abundance. There's so much abundance, and you know, but yeah, to meet your needs in the material world, and enough to give to others, right? Because then it just frees you up to do other things to benefit the community, and
That's what I was gonna say too, is I was at my best, I am at my best when I can give. And I have 22 nieces and nephews, as you know. I have a huge Italian family, and I miss being able to give to the family. Now, it's not my love language. Do you know what I mean? My dad, I think money or providing was his love language. I never want it to be that, but I just feel like you just have more agency in the world. I mentioned I like eating. I'm a foodie. I miss movies. It does take money to do that. So I do kind of miss some of the agency that came with my financial situation being more stable. But part of that is the giving too. And I know there's other ways of giving, but I miss being able to be Uncle Disney, and like give. I miss it. So maybe I'm being called upon to find other forms of currency that I can give.
well, that's already happening. I knowing you, I mean, your words are currency. Your art is currency.
Hmm. Yeah, but you also mentioned feeling unappreciated. So, like the things in the reading, the things that, well, I think they're on everybody's radar. Legacy, when you have a loss, like losing your mother. And, she visited a lot in the beginning, by the way. I told you I had a lot of dreams about her. And I'm a little worried because she hasn't visited in a while. But I'm sure she'll be back. But I think, when you experience loss, legacy becomes very important. And
Yeah.
then being appreciated is part of that, right?
And I'm going to say this, living as a minimalist or simply, which, my partner and I do too. We live pretty simply. That is a legacy to the whole planet because we can't
Mm,
keep consuming. I mean, it's
mm,
impossible, at least at a level of where we're at collectively,
mm. So the
living
legacy
simply.
is not recognition for that. It's just the doing of it, right?
The doing exactly. So, and that gets back because legacy with recognition is ego.
Right,
And,
right.
so giving or living simply um, without attachment to recognition, right?
Right. But I think maybe you're an example to people, right? And even Jasper, you were an example. Because I think back to my grandparents, they lived again in the desert for most of my childhood, and they read by kerosene lamp. They had a generator in case of an emergency, and so we learned a lot from that, and it's in our souls. Just the minimalist lifestyle they lived in the desert, which was very spiritually cleansing, by the way.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, it sounds like it would be beautiful. Where was that? What
Just
desert?
all over, but
Uh,
most of my childhood was Kennedy Meadows. If you know Kennedy Meadows, it's kind of right between Yosemite and then like on this side, it would be right before Bishop Mammoth Lone Pine.
oh, okay,
It's
pretty.
beautiful. Yeah, like right in the
Yeah.
middle of that canyon between Yosemite and like if you think of, do you know where Olancha is by chance?
No, I don't.
It's south of, it's before Lone Pine, basically. Like after, if you're going up to 395, after Mojave, but before Lone Pine. Anyway, beautiful, beautiful. Just emblazoned on my soul.
Yeah.
I think this has been enlightening all the way around.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Oh, I said, just listening to everything you guys have been talking about, it's just been so enlightening, all the way around.
I'm glad you were listening to the reading, because I did keep thinking, God, Virginia's been getting an earful, or we've been sharing, right, a lot lately.
Yeah.
So I knew some of it would resonate with you. Maybe you got a vicarious reading like I did with my mom's visitation.
I didn't pick up on anything, but I was picking up on, like I said, stuff that related between conversations, like where I'm like, I see that, from this conversation and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating. Roslyn, is there any value to me telling you the animals that visited me? It wasn't a bird and it
Yes, I'm
wasn't a
just
butterfly.
curious.
Okay, it wasn't a bird and it wasn't a butterfly.
Okay.
But I mean, I kind of think, I'm I'm a storyteller, so I'm kind of into symbolism and metaphor. And I used to analyze friends' dreams, but just for fun, because that's the language of the soul. That's the language I speak. But I would always, instead of going with the Jungian archetype, I would say, yes, but what does it mean to you? Do you know what I mean? Like, a train isn't always a penis. Like, so I would go image by image, and instead I would say, if I say cat, don't say hat, but just tell me what it means without thinking. And so that's kind of how I would analyze dreams. They were personal and not necessarily universal symbols. But sometimes my own dreams are really, they'll slap you in the face. They're so blatant and almost insulting, like in the simplicity of their symbolism. This one, sorry, go ahead.
So I was just going to interrupt you. I just want to mention, because Virginia said she was interested in plants and herbalism, and we're talking about dreams. Plants come to me in dreams.
Wow.
So much. And they're plants that I don't even know exist. And they'll tell me what they're for. And then they exist.
Holy shit. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Madeline Lingle wrote A Wind in the Door, and that other one just on intuition, on a hunch. And everything she wrote about cell biology turned out to be true. So
yeah, it's the plant. Yeah, it's amazing, because I've had so many dreams with that, and it'd be like, I'm fireweed, take me, and it's like, oh my God, what are you? And I'll look it up, and because they're so in my brain, right?
wow.
It's like, you're on the path. I have so many examples of that. And so,
but why do they appear at that moment? Like, once you learn that plant exists and maybe its medicinal qualities, are you meant to check it out, or what do you think?
Oh yeah, there's so many, but I'll just briefly, long story. There was a moth in my dream, and I knew it was not just a moth. And I said, show yourself. And this man appeared, and he had like this big cigar tobacco, and he blew it in my face. And he said, this is fireweed, and people should take it, have everybody take it. When this orange butterfly or moth appears, there's many people to drink it for your respiratory system. And I'm like,
so specific. Wow.
Yeah, fireweed. And so in the morning, I wake up and I'm looking at fireweed, and I'm like, oh, it's this. I'm like, wonder where it is. I literally pass this plant, all the time. Wow. It's kind of like a weed. And, so of course I gather it and I make tea of it. I have a whole bunch. Told my friend who's an herbalist about the dream. She's been drinking it, but it's like, I get stuff like that in dreams.
Wow.
And so, yeah. So it's not even like symbolism. It's those type of dreams. Not most dreams are my, symbolism, but that.
Well, again, I mentioned, so sorry to interrupt you, but yeah, I mentioned that Madeline Lingle thing because it just illustrates that and Emily Bronte wrote Wuthering Heights without really leaving her house, but she tapped into these really universal archetypes. So even though yours are more specific and they're not symbolic of the spiritual journey per se, they're very specific, but it just says we have access to all of it, the collective unconscious, right? Everything man has learned along the way. There's people that can wake up from a head injury and suddenly play concert piano. There's people that wake up and can suddenly speak a language they've never been exposed to.
Yeah.
So we have access, whether it's in our DNA or we tap in energetically through non-local communication to collective consciousness.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to send you a name of a physicist. Which I won't go into, there's a whole other podcast, but basically the universe is encapsulated. It's not infinite. It's encapsulated. They're finding in like a thin layer, like almost like a bubble with an empty void inside, and the dark matter, and where we put our attention to, and all the information's out there. but fills the void like a hologram. Like you hit your attention and your light, and the photons hit the thing, and it comes into the void like a hologram and creates the situation, or you can access what's already been there for the entire existence of.
Right.
So that's a whole other podcast.
Well, but I think What the Bleep hit on that as well, right? And then even that Everywhere All the Time movie.
Oh, for sure.
Hit on the multiverse idea that it could be that when the bosons pop over, right, and then the waves fix as particles, that is the reality that you reify with your sense organs, you know?
Well, absolutely. And the boson Higgs is really a field. And so that's like you said particles in the sense so they get funding and stuff.
I
but
see.
So this is like they hit on it. Now this is the science behind what they're finding. I think you'll find it like this is just very recent findings.
Yeah, What the Bleep was a little outdated, but I also, this slant was a little bit about, materialism, a little materialistic when it comes to manifestation, that sort of thing. Anyway, I'll check it out. Yeah, we can even put the link in the bio if you want. But anyway, you mentioned plants. By the way, the animals in my dream lent themselves to some research too. They seemed invented, and I'll just tell you it real quick. So you were in it, actually. You weren't in it, but we were talking about you. So Dave and Sherry were living, and that's for our listeners, if you're even still there. Sherry is the mother of my godson. So Sherry and Dave and Jasper were living in a little town, and I'm not going to remember. It wasn't Markleyville, but it was a lot like that. They were living right on the edge of town at the timberline. And then for some reason, you were in Tahoe, in the city, which you normally wouldn't be, right? And you were teaching. So that came up somehow. But then I was with Sherry and Dave. We were in a little handy mart, and we were in line. And this doesn't matter so much to the dream, but the cashier seemed to know everybody, so it was moving very slowly because there was kind of some gossip going around. Anyway, and then we ended up back at their house. And it was kind of a combination of places Sherry has lived that I've heard about or been to. But it was kind of cool on the edge of town, right at the timberline. But the thing that wasn't normal was there was kind of these huge floor-to-ceiling glass windows. And maybe even on two sides of the building, so it was almost like looking into... It felt like a display at the zoo, like because two sides of the building looked out into this particular patch of forest. So all I can say is it was very enclosed. It was ambient light. There was no direct light. It was kind of magical, almost like there was snow or just kind of a white ambiance bouncing around, but maybe little patches of snow. Anyway, it just felt very enclosed, like an exhibit at the zoo. Anyway, so I'm talking to Sherry and Dave and Jasper, and animals just started appearing outside the window. And yes, the usual suspects, like I'm sure there was a squirrel and a raccoon and things you might expect. But then there was like a bear and then another bear, but they were prehistoric, like huge prehistoric bears. That's why I said later I actually Googled it to see what they looked like. But I just knew it was like a prehistoric bear. And then a gorilla. And it wasn't like the bears were a little menacing, but the gorilla was just kind of goofy and just there. He wasn't like a plot point. He was just making a cameo. Anyway, at some point, Cheddar and Cheddar and Bowie were just out there. And that's their dog and my dog. And I suddenly was worried for Bowie. So I think Dave went out first and I followed him. And at one point, Bowie was barking at one of those big bears, but I kind of knew he could take care of himself. He was just barking at it. Anyway, we get out there and now Bowie has gone down the hill because everything was kind of going downward into a pit that was out of view. So this is significant. I was worried about Bowie. I start going after him and now I'm slipping down the hill into this pit. Interesting, right? Very blatant.
Yeah.
Anyway, and the animals are still there. They're just hanging out, and I'm just kind of slipping down this hill. But then two of the huge prehistoric... Oh, and there was one other animal that I did look up, and I kind of found it online. It felt like a prehistoric version of a goat, but huge and solid white and shaggy. So I wasn't...
a yak?
Well, no. I looked up a bunch of animals, and That's why I settled on prehistoric, because it felt like, yeah, an early yak or something. But it was very whimsical and very invented. The horns weren't as pronounced as it would be on a yak, but it was just furry and white, which is significant, right? And it just felt prehistoric, felt ancient. But I never found the exact prehistoric animal, but I did find mythological, and I'll show them to you later. I found certain mythological creatures that were exactly what I saw in my dream.
Oh,
Yeah, that was a trip. But anyway,
wow.
so we're at the very end of the dream, as I'm slipping down the hill, these two bears start encroaching on me. And it was the feeling that was more significant than anything. I was like, well, I want this to be a kumbaya moment, right? And I want them to feel benign, is that the word? Or non-threatening, or,
Yeah.
like the love at the core of it. I wanted to connect with nature, and I wanted it to be a positive experience. But as he gets closer, he's like sniffing, and I just didn't know which way it was going to go. I was like, I could become bear food. We don't know. And I woke up.
Ooh. Yeah. Yeah. There's so much in that,
Yeah,
you
I just thought
know?
it would be a trip if, like you said, animals sometimes visit you. Well, you got the bird and the butterfly. I got the much bigger, seemingly more menacing animals.
Yeah. And you got it in the dream world.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right. Yours were in person,
yeah. I mean, a
like a
bird
singing
literally
telegram.
came into the house. You might be the white furry goat-like creature.
Well, thank you for saying that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that sounds so interesting how the bear sniffed you when you woke up, which um, seems real.
it was very vivid, yes. Well, here's what else. They do say, try, like with a good novel, think of all the characters as aspects of your psyche or aspects of you. So I think I was maybe all of those creatures. I was the goofy gorilla and the whimsical goat thing. I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, yeah. I just think it's funny. Dave went out first. You go.
No, Dave went ahead of me.
No, that's what I mean. It's like, okay, go ahead, Dave. Go. The two big bears, gorilla. It will be fine.
Yeah, I don't know what the significance of. I only remember that he went first because I said it right away when I was groggy. I had just woken up out of it. But anyway, the more pronounced thing to me was just that theme of like, how Albert Einstein said the most significant question you can ask yourself is, do I live in what were the words? Friendly universe or a hostile one?
I'm unsure, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not positive. I don't
It
know.
wasn't friendly, but you get the idea. It was like, do you live
Yeah.
in a benevolent, that's the word, a benevolent universe or a hostile one? And so that's how I felt with the bears coming. And they were sniffing like they were interested, but I was like, yeah, they could just be hungry. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's also your choice.
Yeah, exactly. It was like a Rorschach test. Yeah.
Do you want? It's up to you.
Hmm. Yeah. And I didn't wake up like sweating. My heart wasn't beating. It was just like, okay. I was presented with the option and then I woke up out of it. Anyway, there's probably nowhere to go with that. But thanks
Yeah, yeah.
so
And
much
I'll
for
just
listening.
comment one other thing, and I know this is like super long and everything, but when I say it's up to you in the sense when you're talking about what Albert Einstein said, right? It's literally our choice.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
I
then
agree.
yeah, because it's that empty void in the bubble.
Hmm. Well, I sometimes feel like there is love at the core of the universe when you, right, extract mind and ego from our thought forms. There really is love. But then if you buy the Darwinian thing, which really took over, right, the public imagination for so long, which Lamarck, he's been exonerated, right? Do you know Lamarck?
The scientists.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like he predates Darwin, but his idea was there's more symbiosis than there is competition, right?
Oh, absolutely. And the origin of a species,
Mhm.
Darwin wrote at the end, collaboration is the best thing for humanity. As if we others took Darwin's work out of context and then put it
Yes.
on to social. And I think it was Spencer. into the social sciences, and then it just took off in our narrative of humanity.
Exactly, with capitalism in mind and manifest destiny, right? It was that whole imperialist peak. So it suited, right? It suited us to say, oh, survival of the fittest, when actually it was survival of the most adaptable.
Yes, and for humans, the most collaborative.
Beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah,
I do think that's making
yeah.
a comeback, that kind of thinking, right?
Yeah, and Darwin wrote it himself, but do you have to read Origin of a Species? At least,
I think
Um,
maybe you said this on the last podcast, but very few references in that book to competition.
yeah, absolutely. And then you got like it's a time of eugenics. It was used for that and all that stuff, but it was totally out of context.
Yep. And anyway, check out Lamarck, because I read that and I'm like, I want to sign up for his religion. I like it way better than what we've done with Darwinian theory. It's not the word. It's kind of like the Bible. The word itself is pretty solid. It's just what we do with it.
Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah. There's so much, Nick. We can just keep on talking.
I know. I'm going to edit this down because I think there are some good snippets in here, but I'm going to, probably do some heavy editing.
Yeah, because I think of like Christ and had nothing to do with the Bible. Christ was like in a scene, a Nazarene in a scene. The scenes had access to, they were scholars, they had access to information from the West, the East.
Well, I don't know that word. What is a scene? What does that mean?
A scene is it's a group, like a group of people, like I guess a philosophy, a belief system, a worldview.
Mm-hmm.
So they lived in nature. They were vegetarians. They were also Nazarene. They say Jesus of Nazareth. That's where he was from. A Nazarene's from that place, but they were in that area. They were what you call Essenes. That was their philosophical view of the world and how they lived. They were kind of living on the outside of society in a way.
Mm-hmm. Like the Bedouins, like a tribe. The Bedouins kind of live outside of the social structures. Yeah.
Yeah. And Christ was Jewish, and with this background of philosophy, and they didn't want to do any harm. And that makes me think of because Buddhism and yoga, which came way before, it makes me think of the concept of ahimsa, or ahimsa.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do no harm, and so not eating meat's part of that, and all this stuff. So they had access to. They were serious scholars too.
Mm-hmm. And well, there's a whole school of thought too that there's a lot of time that's unaccounted for in the Bible, right, during Christ's upbringing. And so, have you heard that theory that the wise men came from the East for a reason, because he actually spent time, and that's where he got a lot of his principles from back East?
Oh yeah, I've heard. Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And I just read this thing today. Some archaeologists, they found writings that were tucked away in some museum because they thought it was just writings during the time of or after Christ, but close enough in history to have information on his young childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just tucked away in a museum, and it was just deciphered like today or yesterday or something.
And does it confirm that idea, or?
I haven't, I just got a bleep. I don't think I didn't read the whole thing. I didn't read what they actually found. It was just like a little bleep in the science news kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we can agree the word he's a cool dude, right? Christ was pretty damn cool. And his message was pretty cool. But of course, over the years, institutionalized religion might have bastardized the original tenets. But I did at one point think, I so admire what I understand about Christ. I'm going to find out actually what came out of his mouth, right? You still have the process of canonization and the early church, and, they picked, right, leave this book in, but not that one.
Oh, yeah.
The Dead Sea Scrolls and the Gospel of Judah and all these things that got left out. I think it was definitely whatever served the power structures of controlling the populace, and the church was part of that. However, I had this fantasy that actually everything was pretty solid that came out of his mouth. I'm going to find out. So I got this book called something like Just Jesus. And you do jazz hands when you say that, Just Jesus. And it was literally only quotes from his mouth, like none of the added stuff. And I was like, it kind of confirmed my hunch that he was on it. And, even Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John told versions of the story, the gospel, that suited their readership, whether it was a pagan readership or a Jewish one, right? And so I always accounted for the insufficiency of language, the cultural relativity of these different interpretations of the Bible, and again, the agenda. But I was a little disappointed because there were some problematic things, even stuff that supposedly came out of his mouth at the Sermon on the Mount, and different parts of the Bible. Have you ever read Just the Words of Christ?
I have not read that book. I read the Sermon on the Mount. That's probably my favorite. There was one point in my life in my early 20s, I'm like, I should just read this whole thing.
The Bible?
The Bible. The whole thing. I did it.
Are you serious?
I'm totally serious.
You're my idol. You're my idol.
In the Old Testament, there's a lot of, father of this and, a lot of killing and bloodshed. And yeah. So, because I was just, what is this book that has influenced so much influence on our society? And
were you disowned from the family when you read it? Oh no, because you're Christian on one side, right? And Jewish on the other.
Yeah. And the Torah there's a lot in the New Testament. I mean, in the Torah, and it's basically a Hebrew story in a way. The Old Testament. I mean, there's a lot in it, not just Hebrew. There's a lot of different groups in there, but no, because my parents on both sides, they weren't really, religious at all. Mm-hmm. We just did some things, and then my great aunts and uncles and stuff, I got more of the traditional stuff on both sides. But yeah.
Well, all my friends are Jewish. Let's just be clear. I don't know why I didn't plan it that way. But one of them is a Jew for Jesus. She has a huge crush on Jesus. That's how I met her. We were in Jesus Christ Superstar together. But anyway, yeah, I admire you. It's a goal of mine to read it cover to cover. I know, of course, from Moana's, I know the ones I memorized, but I have not read it cover to cover, and it's a goal. But I admire you, and I have a friend that literally at the age of 75, with all the, strife in the Middle East and the two-state solution fantasy and all of that, she said, you know what? I'm just going to read the Quran and see what all the fuss is about. And she read it cover to cover at like 70 whatever. Isn't that admirable? Beautiful.
Yeah. And the irony is everybody's cousins, and in the Quran, Jesus was still a prophet. You know what I mean? Like
so much shared territory. Yes.
Yeah, so much.
Okay, this is a fish. I think we've talked about everything now.
Oh no, I could keep going, but not.
God love us. We should probably get drunk next time and see what happens.
Well, I don't think we can keep talking forever, because I know we do have our limit on our.
I know, and I figured I actually figured you had checked out by now. Thank you so much. I will edit this, I promise. Everybody. But anyway, let's do an outro just so I have something to edit at the end. Thank you, Rosalyn.
Yes. Oh, you're so welcome. Yeah, it was fun.
I agree. And I look forward to the written part. I feel like we covered a lot, though, and I hope it was remotely interesting. But I do know so much time went into that. So thank you. I'm going to continue thinking about it, and I look forward to the written part. Thank you.
Yes, I will email. I didn't finish it, so I'll email it to you.
No hurry at all.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Thank you, Virginia. And to our listeners, remember, life is story. And we can get our hands in the clay. Individually and collectively, we can write our own story. See you next time.
We want to take a moment to thank our wonderful listeners and supporters. Your continued support and sharing of our podcast helps us spread the transformative power of storytelling. If you enjoy our episodes, please rate and review us on your favorite platform and share the podcast with friends and family. For more enriching conversations and insights, subscribe to Language of the Soul podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media and visit our Patreon website for the latest updates and exclusive content. Your support helps us continue to bring these important stories to life. If you'd like to support us further, consider joining our Patreon community for exclusive content and donation options. Every bit of support helps us reach more hearts and minds.